reason that we're doing this is that we have been trying to talk to City Hall all summer. And all we've been trying to do is get the name and the phone number of somebody in the City Health Department and somebody on the mayor's own staff who can talk to us about a clinical investigation of Ibogaine. Now, there are two potential ways to do this. There is a small pilot study in Bronx, Lebanon. I have material on that, but frankly, from talking to Mimi Epstein, it didn't seem to me that they were ready to go. I also, talked to her 2 months ago and said, can we have a budget? If we're going to take this proposal to Mayor DeBlasio, we had to give him a budget, right? Doesn't that make sense? She couldn't come up with a budget. She was busy. Then it transpires that Bronx, Lebanon wants to complete a wing of their hospital before they'll do the clinical trial. Last Wednesday, in the New York Times, there was a story about twice as many heroin deaths in the last year as the year before. Heroin use moving to new groups in the population. My point is, either there is a heroin crisis or there isn't. Either we act like something is, the house is on fire, or people are kind of like sitting around saying, do you smell smoke? Do you smell smoke? I don't really smell smoke. Either the house is on fire or it isn't. And I think that with the number of people who are dying and the prevalence of heroin, the house is on fire. Now, I have a friend named Murtaza Majid. Yesterday morning, he landed in Kabul, Afghanistan. He's been living in Sweden. On the way to get on the airplane, he gets a call from his contact at the ministry in Afghanistan that's in charge of this. Apparently, the import license for Ibogaine is going to sail right through. We have no problem bringing Ibogaine into Afghanistan and no problem doing 6 to 10 treatments to demonstrate to the local addiction doctors that this stuff works dramatically for heroin. Basically, I don't know whether you guys are familiar with Ibogaine, but 30 minutes after you take Ibogaine, your heroin withdrawal is gone. And unlike methadone and Suboxone and Dilaudid and every other opiate that you give, the withdrawal never comes back. At the end of the Ibogaine experience, your craving is severely diminished. You have maybe 5% of the craving you would ordinarily have after a heroin withdrawal. So they're going to have it in Afghanistan in 6 weeks. We are doing this press conference today to dramatize the fact that we can't even get a call back in New York City. The place where Ibogaine was invented, my friend Howard Lotsoff spent years filing patents for heroin, for cocaine, for methamphetamine, for alcohol, for cigarettes, and for polydrug dependency. He worked with Deborah Mash at the University of Miami, and as it transpired, Deborah Mash had an agenda of trying to develop her own drug out of Ibogaine. And they never did have the clinical trial that was promised. I have here, from the National Institute on Drug Abuse, papers for a $5 million grant for a synthetic version of Ibogaine that is being developed by the National Institute on Drug Abuse. They developed this to try to get a form of Ibogaine where you didn't have the visualizations, the REM-like effects, because they said that's too much like LSD. In 2010, we discovered that the main therapeutic effect of Ibogaine, which is to express a growth factor that regenerates dopamine neurons, is integrally linked to the visualizations. In other words, you cannot have the main curative effect of Ibogaine without the visualizations. And this NIDA synthetic does not have it. So we have a simple solution. Let's have a head-to-head trial. Ibogaine versus 18-MC. Let's find out something significant scientifically. Does the growth factor make a difference? Do people, when they visualize on Ibogaine, get certain breakthrough moments where they say, aha, that's where my life went wrong? Is the cognitive benefit of Ibogaine important? These are questions that can only be answered with a comparative trial. That is why I'm not so enthusiastic about the thing in Bronx, Lebanon, which is well-intentioned, but it is small and it's not a comparative trial. During the AIDS crisis, the FDA promulgated regulations to allow a city or a county to do its own clinical trial. New York City has 2 of 5 institutions in the country that are certified by the National Institute on Drug Abuse to do the clinical trial. So the city health department could contract with either Columbia University or NYU, and they're already certified to do it with NIDA. I propose that Mayor DeBlasio convene a meeting of all the people who are responsible, set up a task force, and aggressively implement as fast as possible, ASAP, clinical investigation comparing Ibogaine and 18-MC, which will give us science, and it will mean that hundreds of New Yorkers who are heroin addicted can sign up, because it will be an open enrollment trial. It'll be open to as many people as want to try Ibogaine. And let me tell you, the addict community knows about Ibogaine. I've got this, for those of you who don't have it, I sent a lot of people in the CUNY crowd 2 videos, Rite of Passage and Afghani Heroin Hell. This also has on it a 7-minute excerpt from Law and Order Special Victims Unit. So this has been on SVU, this has been on Homeland, right? People know about it. People are spending $5,000 to $7,000 to go to Mexico and take an Ibogaine treatment, because you only have to take it once. People should not have to go to Mexico. Poor people, and many addicts have exhausted their funds. Poor people should be able to get this from the city of New York. If this is really a crisis, if this is really a social priority, it makes a lot more sense to give an Ibogaine treatment that lasts about 5 days than to put people in prison for 5 years. And that's what's happening today. Incredibly wasteful. 1 million people in prison for drugs. And it is totally unnecessary. Deborah Mash and Howard Lotsoff could have composed their differences in 1996, we could have Ibogaine today. The reason we don't have Ibogaine is the lack of political will. The Republicans are against everything, and the Democrats are afraid of their shadow. So there's other people who are going to speak today, but I'm going to first ask Britta Love to talk. She wrote the article about what happened when we tried to get Ibogaine before. Britta?
Thank you. Hi everyone, my name is Britta Love. I speak as someone who has first-hand experience of what Ibogaine treatment can do. I was suffering through addiction and found my way to Costa Rica for illegal Ibogaine treatment, and it saved my life. And afterwards, I really wanted to know how it was possible that something so effective could be inaccessible in the wealthiest country in the world. And as I started to look into the history of the Ibogaine movement and to see that NIDA, the Drug Enforcement Agency, they've known about Ibogaine, they've been presented with evidence about Ibogaine, it really blew my mind. So what I want to share with you today is a little synopsis of the story of how we almost cured addiction in the United States. I first have to introduce Iboga. Iboga is a little shrub that grows in West Africa. It's from this shrub that Ibogaine is extracted. It was first brought to America in the 1960s, and Howard Lotsoff is the one who first discovered and promoted the fact that it completely interrupted addiction. In fact, he gave it to 7 of his junkie friends, and 5 of them were able to stay off of dope immediately afterwards. This told him he was onto something. Unfortunately, in 1968, Ibogaine gets put into the Schedule I Controlled Substances Act, while it has no ability to be abused, it's not for recreational use, nobody is taking it, and this sets back any ability for us to do research into how Ibogaine can treat addiction, as well as a number of other disorders, from severe anxiety and depression and OCD and you name it. So it's really interesting to see how our modern medical system has inhibited the scientific research we need into Ibogaine. We had huge pharmaceutical companies that would look at Ibogaine and say things like, while the indication for narcotic addiction is almost certainly worthwhile, it has not been identified as a strategic commitment for our company. And it makes me ill to think of all the lives that could have been saved if only that commitment was a little more strategic for Big Pharma. It takes until the rise of the harm reduction movement for Ibogaine to get some traction. But it would need DEA and National Institute of Drug Abuse approval for studies to start. So Howard Lotsoff has the first clinical studies for humans in Holland, and he brings scientists from the National Institute of Drug Abuse over there to monitor before and after what happens when you give a heroin junkie Ibogaine treatment. And they're flabbergasted. They are knocked out. They say they have nothing in development that even approaches these kinds of results. And they come back to NIDA. And their boss says, you're a little too enthusiastic. We don't like this enthusiasm around Ibogaine. If you don't stop going to monitor these trials in Holland, we're going to move you to a different department. So there's a lot of resistance. And this is for a number of reasons. This is because of the stigma of dealing with a Schedule I drug. This is because of scientists whose lives have been invested in researching methadone and Suboxone treatment. This is due to the fact that this is a plant that has limited marketability and profitability due to the fact that this is a natural substance and the patent can only be for its applied uses. So Dana Beal here, Ibogaine, a marijuana activist, and ACT UP, advocacy group for AIDS, managed to get the National Institute of Drug Abuse to add Ibogaine to the list of medications that need to be evaluated for addiction. But at the same time, NIDA works to ban these pre and post Ibogaine treatment evaluations. And this would prove to be the modus operandi of NIDA, sort of making a little bit of a gesture towards Ibogaine research, but sabotaging and stalling all the way. But Ibogaine is gaining traction. We're in the middle of an AIDS crisis, and harm reduction is on the move. In 1992, there are more research and articles done on Ibogaine and its efficiency than all previous years combined. And the first HIV-positive patients comes back from Holland, having both cured their addiction and with their disease in remission after an Ibogaine treatment. So by 1994, things look promising. At NIDA, all the scientists involved, even those who previously argued for toxicity in Ibogaine treatment, have changed their mind and decided that at therapeutic doses, Ibogaine is not neurotoxic. The FDA's Dr. Curtis Wright says, "It sounds to me like you folks have a clinical trial here." The proposals are set, the date is never set. In fact, they'd never take place. 1994, politics come into place. In the elections, the Republicans push a tough line on the war on drugs. It's back to the Reagan-era drug war. Democrats are competing to be the toughest on drugs. The anti-Ibogaine militants take advantage of this changed atmosphere, and at NIDA, even though all the Ibogaine experts agree that it's safe to start human trials, Frank Voci, the conservative associate director, brings in his own external consultants who know nothing about Ibogaine. And they believe that nothing can act to treat addiction. Based on that, Voci stops all research. This is the death knell for Ibogaine research. And clinical trials are put aside, in reality, due to pressure from politics and the pharmaceutical industry. The Clinton drug czar calls Ibogaine a dangerous and addictive hallucinogen and a trick. And Iboga waits in the wings for modern medicine to pick it up again. Now, I and many others who I've met and know well have gone to find Ibogaine treatments and heal themselves, but it's unacceptable for it to be limited to such a privileged few who have the access to the resources to travel outside of this country and spend thousands of dollars for treatments. Ibogaine is not a magic bullet, but it's hope where there's very, very little hope in this world of addiction. And we have this opportunity now to look back and fix this history, to look back and say it is unacceptable for politics, money, and fear to prevent science from doing what it does best. It is only right that we as New Yorkers, where Ibogaine was first invented, where we have the incredible destructive heroin epidemic as a potential driving force for remedying this history. Let's bring Ibogaine to New York City and let's fix what should have been. Thank you.
We got a new man on board for the movement, Immortal Technique.
This was one of the hardest things to fundraise for. It was very difficult to spread the word. I've done lots of charity. I've done partnerships with human rights organizations. We've gone to Afghanistan. We've gone to Haiti. The difficulty in promoting something like Ibogaine is that before all of these things were to benefit people who had lost their homes because of a natural disaster in the Caribbean, or people who were homeless because of a war and didn't have parents, they were orphans. Those were easy things to sell to the public as join me, help me in doing this. But when you try to show people, we need to help addicts, we need to help people that have a disease, that need a cure, that don't just need someone to consistently leech off them and make money, then I ran into hard times. Then I ran into people that said to me, Felipe, what are you doing? Why are you wasting your time helping people that are trying to kill themselves? And then I realized that every single person at some point engages in some self-destructive behavior. Every single person that's watching this right now has an addiction. And you should thank whatever God you believe in that your addiction is sex, that it's playing with cameras, that it's recording music, that it's playing with toy soldiers, that it's painting model airplanes, and that it's not using drugs to escape negative things from your childhood. It's not using drugs to escape the effects of abuse, to escape the effects of neglect. So when I talk about trying to raise awareness for something like this, I think it's incredibly important to show people that it's been an uphill battle the entire time, because we've been trained to look at certain people in our society as disposable. We've been trained to look at people in our society as if they don't matter. Whatever happens to them, they must have deserved it in some way, shape, or form. So innocent people who are underrepresented in a community become thugs. So people who hold up our entire economy are leechers, not immigrants, right? So people that are the victim of a disease and are being put into prison for no other reason than having that are addicts that are bringing our entire society down. And we need to just, quote unquote, cut off the cancer. That's what I got from a lot of activists. It wasn't even just regular people. That's the part that broke my heart. And that's why I'm here unapologetically to support research for Ibogaine. I know that it's an unknown thing for a lot of people. People hear it and they don't even know what it is. They hear it for the first time. They hear that it has its origins in West Africa, and that's about it. And then all of a sudden it disappears and it appears in New York as a mystery cure for heroin. Well, I want to explain some things to people. Even if you manage to leave an addictive substance, that's not going to stop your coming to terms with all the difficulty you've had in life. If you've been a heroin addict for years and tomorrow you're clean, that doesn't mean your entire life has been saved. That means that you now have the opportunity to confront all those things that have happened in the past. You know, being an individual who's been to prison, I think one of the most positive things that came out of my prison experience was that I was sent to a rehab at the end of it all, almost routinely, as if they just send kids to rehab. All right, well, send him to rehab for the last month of his prison visit. And you know what I saw there? People who didn't belong in prison, people who didn't belong in jail, people who didn't belong spending football numbers there because they had a disease, because they had an addiction, and it broke my heart. So I said to myself, what do I risk by coming down here? Could I be wrong? Could we all be wrong? Could I be embarrassed? Is that what we're afraid of in this society? To be embarrassed, to risk something? To say, hey man, you know what? I tried love and it didn't work. So you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna turn my back on love completely. Or I tried to find a cure for addiction. I tried to find a cure for heroin for people who are underrepresented and dying in places that people obviously don't care about here. I brought individuals from Brooklyn, from the Bronx, from Harlem, because those are the first lines of defense. Those are the places that are gonna suffer first when there are no responses. We talked a little bit about Murtaza, about him going to Afghanistan. How is it that in Afghanistan people have the opportunity to experience some life-changing thing like this, and here in a country that quote-unquote sponsored the liberation of Afghanistan, after we sponsored its liberation from Russia, after we've sponsored digging for elements that now we've decided have a monetary value in the trillions, and this is all a coincidence all of a sudden. How is it that this place that certain people in this country, unfortunately, take pride in bombing back to the Stone Age, has a functional clinic like this, and this country doesn't? What's the message of the day? Is it that the government of Afghanistan cares more about its people than the people of America? Is it that there's less legal loopholes to jump through? Is it a gigantic pharma industry that just isn't present there until we brought it there? So the real question then becomes, why are people so afraid to talk about Ibogaine? What is it that makes us a reactionary instead of a proactive society? And this doesn't have just effects for us, this has effects for the rest of the world. If Afghanistan is the major producer of heroin for the entire planet, then certainly curing heroin addiction in the epicenter of where this occurs would be magnanimous, not just for the medical advancements that we can achieve, but also the political connotations. We justify our presence in that country based on how the poppy production business goes. And by that, I'll explain. I went to Afghanistan in 2009 because I partnered with a human rights organization called OMAID, and we built an orphanage and a school. And in some of my travels, aside from doing that, I saw so many people from different walks of life, people that looked like they were Asian, black, white, and they all came from Afghanistan. They were all from a country that had so many different cultures and societies. I saw people that claimed to me that their poppy fields were burned because they said bad things about the government. And I saw people who worked for individuals who were allied to America who didn't have their poppy fields burned. But we're not here to point a finger at an entire society for its ideas about how to conduct itself in a war or nation building. We're talking about people building. We're talking about individuals that have the power to give someone their life back. And instead of taking that responsibility that a government has upon itself, all it's done is stand in the way of this. And I feel it's important for me to point out that poor people should be the ones that also have a right not to die as well. You know, someone once told me a very poignant saying. They said, when you're rich, you're an alcoholic, but when you're poor, you're a drunk. So we find fancy titles, and make no mistake, addiction doesn't care if you're Christian, addiction doesn't care if you're Jewish or Muslim or white or Buddhist or Latino or Asian or black or white. It will take you regardless. It doesn't matter if you are the child of a person who is in this crowd, or the child or the parent or someone who is in this building behind me. And it sounds like satire and I'm making jokes, but I'm not. Do you know why? Because the majority of addicts live functional lives. They don't live a broken down, stumbling existence. You know addicts right now. Every single one of you knows someone who's a functional alcoholic, a functional drug abuser. Their drug of choice may not be something that comes from a pharmacy, or it may not be something that comes from the corner. That doesn't make their struggle or their pain any less. It doesn't make their suffering or what they have to go through diminished in any capacity, because they're all suffering from the same thing, something that takes away from your ability to live life on your own terms. We fought very hard for all the freedoms that we have in this country, every single one of us, some harder than others, because we didn't become a democracy until 1967, when all of us could participate. And still, sometimes it doesn't feel like a democracy. So we're here as a unified people to express that. People of all colors, people of all religions, people of all walks of life. I want to say something else too. I don't really have anything negative to say about the mayor or the police force. Today, I think the only negative thing I'm going to say is about myself. And I want to say that I need to stop being reactive. I need to start being more proactive in my life. We've all been too reactionary. And I'll give an example of that before I get out of here real quick. There are all these water towers on top of every building in this city. You don't notice them because we don't look up enough. We're always looking at our phone, or we're talking to someone. But they're all there. If one of them falls tomorrow and kills a child, you know what's going to happen? There's going to be an ordinance from this office which says we have to inspect every water tower. We got to make sure no other kids get killed. By the way, we don't want to get sued either. The reality is that this is a reactionary thing, because no one gives a fuck about any of those water towers right now when you and me are having this conversation. Let's not let the water tower be your child's life. Let's not let that water tower be your brother or your sister's life. We can't help to cure addiction. We can do something better than what's going on now. Something more effective is possible. So people may call me gullible. People may say, hey man, this guy's a dreamer. You're goddamn right. I've made some of my dreams come true. And now it's time for us to stop someone else's nightmare. Because it's not just about making your dreams come true. It's about ending somebody else's nightmare, ending somebody else's suffering. That's what it means to be a human being. Not taking advantage of a system until you filled your pocket so much that you don't want to play the game anymore and you can kick the board to the side and go home. That's not the type of human being I want to be. That's not the type of human being that I think we are. I think we're all better than that. I think deep down inside of us, when we're not afraid to shout it out, we care about other people's lives. And I only say this because my father taught me to be a strong man and never to cry or show emotion and be tough. But I've lost people, I've lost people to this. And it's like putting a gun to your head and pulling the trigger and saying, this bullet's not gonna kill you today, but it's gonna kill you in 10 years, 15 years. And the body knows it's destroying itself. Don't get that twisted. Every time it takes something that poisons itself, it knows you're killing yourself slowly. We can help. We can stop this. And if not, and if we fail, then at least we have the ability to say that we tried, that we did something, that we took a stand while everybody else turned their back and said, business as usual. That's how it goes. My name is Immortal Technique, and all I'm asking you to do today is read more and learn more about Ibogaine and its potential to save people's lives. Thank you very much. Trouble on.
Somebody here who's an activist who works a bit with Immortal Technique who's going to tell you something about the situation in Afghanistan and our effort to bring it to Afghanistan. Talk loud.
Talk loud. Hi guys, my name's Fatima Rahmati, and I just want to start by saying, what would you do if you were walking down the street and there was a mother trying to sell her 5-year-old daughter? If you were faced with that, and there was a mother on the street begging you to buy her daughter, this is a very real reality in Afghanistan. As a mother myself, I can't imagine the kind of hold addiction must have for you to feel so hopeless to sell your child in order to get money for heroin. I have read countless stories about mothers selling their children, about brothers selling their sisters, about fathers selling their daughters to feed an addiction that we know through Ibogaine is curable. I met Dana through Immortal Technique. I am involved with other humanitarian causes for Afghanistan. When this one was presented to me, like Immortal said, there's a stigma with addiction or with wanting to help that group of people. But the more I learned about it, the more I felt compelled to help and be a voice for the voiceless. I'm not here to push any kind of agenda other than speak for people who cannot speak for themselves. I've offered Dana the gift of my time, which is pretty much what I can give him, and to help him raise funds for a clinic in Afghanistan. Thankfully, we've been able to raise these funds, and we're in the process of opening this clinic in Afghanistan. But if we can have this in Afghanistan, what about New York? What about the United States of America? New York is currently in the worst heroin crisis, with people dying from more overdoses in any year since 2003. I feel like we've become a society, this is all things you guys have heard before, but we have become a society that's so desensitized. We see something on a TV screen and we don't want to speak up, we don't want to help because there are so many causes. But doing one thing is better than doing nothing at all. I feel like the Ibogaine is a very, very possible solution, and if we have a solution to a problem, I don't understand why people aren't trying to make the most of that. I read another article about a gentleman in Afghanistan who was asked, what does he see for his future? He had been an addict for a couple of years, and he said, look at my life, look at this life. This is the end for me. I'm waiting for death. That's what I'm waiting for. I don't feel like that anybody should have to ever speak those words, especially when there's something in place that can help them. I don't want our fellow New Yorkers, our fellow Americans, our fellow Afghans, my fellow Afghans, or just anybody of the human race to have something in place. It's as simple as that. We have a solution to a problem. Let's do what we can to make that happen. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, now we have really a brilliant man here today who's been working with the movement. Aton, do you want to come up? This is Aton Edwards. star of MSNBC, Katie Couric, and a bunch of other things.
Yeah, well, obviously Katie is a star. That's true.
Right?
Anyway, yeah, right. All right, so I'll make this brief. I've been working with this guy for over 2 decades in working to try to get this information out about this wonderful tool, that I call it, Ibogaine, that conceivably, in theory, could change the social paradigm of drug abuse in the United States and the world, if we want to get real about it. We're talking about something that can be done with a single dose and changing an addict's life. And here we have, as was discussed earlier with tech, and we as a nation, we've got to come together and demand. You know what I don't like about our positions with Ibogaine is that over these years we've been asking, pay attention to us, pay attention to us. You know what I find? When something is unjust, you don't ask people to pay attention to it. You make them pay attention.
That's right.
Yes.
You can't ask for this. Because the suffering of the people who become addicted to these substances, if there is a tool, if there is a substance, if there is something that can end that suffering quickly, painfully, and of course, as we're speaking in front of City Hall, economically better than anything available, why are we not taking it? Why are we not applying it? And why are you not demanding?
Why?
Demanding that this happen. As we have these addicts in New York who could be treated and cured now, but we have a bureaucracy that refuses to look. I'm sorry, I'm not that kind of an American. You know, the idea is that this was supposed to be the framers, revolutionaries. Okay, fine, if you're revolutionaries and you know what you do, you don't ask. You do. And what I'm asking you is to leave this press conference with an attitude, it's not so, I don't know, how would you say, friendly, but aggressive and focused. And you know that you have something that is going to do good for millions of people, then you demand that we have this trial. We have to demand it. We can't ask anymore because these people are dying. Not to mention feeding the prison industrial complex. This drug war that we have, it's bogus. We've got to end this drug war. We've got to find practical solutions. And this man has dedicated his life to it. And if any of you out there can muster up even 1/10 of the zeal that this man and some of these people that are standing here today to fight for this battle, fight this fight, then Ibogaine will be just as regular as, I don't know, smog in Los Angeles.
Or aspirin. At least aspirin.
No, not aspirin, because guess what? Aspirin kills so many people. Aspirin produces Rise syndrome. This is a drug that cannot even be abused. Why is this still a Schedule 1? Because we're not fighting for it. You don't get anything for asking. You fight. Learn to fight, and you win. Thanks. That's all I got to say.
Go! Okay, Kenny Toglia has been with it since the beginning.
Yes, thanks for the intro there, Dana. Yeah, I'm actually, I've worked with Dana for something like 30 years now. Maybe only AJ here has worked with Dana for a longer period. And now, 50 years. Oh, well, I'm not even that old, man. But in any case, I'm a patient advocate, and I've mostly been a medical marijuana activist. And I'm most famous locally here in New York City when the medical marijuana club that I own, that I was running, was raided in 2001, and I was arrested along with about, 10 patients. And what happened was the charges were eventually completely dismissed in that case because we had a number of cookies that mysteriously disappeared while in police custody. And I took it on myself to make an official complaint. And they said, well, you had a pound of pot. And I said, honestly, I had a lot more pot than that, you guys. And they said, well, you can't prove it. And I said, yes, I can. Here was my inventory for the night. It was run like a regular, like a professional club is done now on the West Coast. So the thing is while I've been a medical marijuana activist, I've had a long occasion to work side by side with a lot of the Ibogaine activists. And one of the things that people really forget about Ibogaine is that, like marijuana, Ibogaine has history that's more than 100 years old. It's such an incredible plant, the Edwards plant. It's such an incredible drug that the colonial French really right away in the early days of the 20th century took it on themselves to study Ibogaine. And so ironically, it is one of the first plant medicines that was studied, for its chemical properties. And I'm trying, man. It's hot out here.
Now speak up.
So, yeah, the thing is the French actually had Ibogaine as an over-the-counter treatment that was available for like 50 years. Now, I think it's called Lamborghini, something like that, but it was taken as like an over-the-counter tonic. And so the thing is people really have like a long experience of using Ibogaine, medicinally, and of course religiously, in Africa, it's of course been used for thousands of years. And I for one think that this is one of the things that doesn't get talked about enough when we're talking about the therapeutic aspect of Ibogaine, is to take it into account like the millennia-old, religious use of Ibogaine, where, in many ways the people used it as a rite of passage into adulthood. And so, even in Africa, it was used as a kind of therapy to, help people to, overcome, whatever bad habits or neuroses they picked up from their parents or their village, if you will, and being raised. So, I just want to bring that out about the long history of Ibogaine. It used really here in the West. And, the fact is there are a lot of reasons why it's not available. And, the black, African thing is really like an obvious one. But, I also feel called to bring up that, in fact, it's because Howard was somebody that came out of, the white counterculture of the 60s, the hippies, if you will. And so, I think that's one of the reasons that Ibogaine, it's been on a slow track is because it came to you from the same people who brought you Nixon's impeachment, So that's the thing. In any case, really, Ibogaine has got to be available. I myself, I've seen Ibogaine successes, and I've seen a few Ibogaine failures. But the fact is that it is a really, really valid, therapeutic tool, and I think it's a lot safer, of course, than maybe some of the other psychedelics like ayahuasca. I find Ibogaine to be a lot safer and more useful than that. And I think it's really that we've got to work, as people who have been kept on the outside, and I think you can look around and see who I'm talking about. We really have to work together now to bring this to the forefront. It is a useful thing, and it could be like a fast exit door for people who want it. And that's the thing. If you want to be able to have that option, it really should be there. So, thanks a lot, folks. I'm Kenneth Toglia. I'm the founder of the New York Medical Marijuana Patients Squad.
Okay, we got Priya is one of the people that's going to be working with us in a coming project. Priya, ready?
Well, I'd just like to thank Dana for organizing this press
Speak
conference.
up.
I'd like to thank Dana for organizing this press conference. Dana's been not just an Ibogaine advocate, but a real ally to many movements, including Occupy, the anarchist movement, the peace activists in this city. So Dana's been supporting free speech and dissent in New York City for decades, and we're grateful to have such a supporter. And his efforts to end the drug war, the war of terror in Afghanistan, these are major human rights crises right now that should be addressed. And as someone said earlier, to have a cure, a potential cure like Ibogaine, and to withhold it
That is morally irresponsible. Instead, we have to be examples of moral courage and say and do the things of the status quo that is profiting from the war, that is profiting from the prison industrial complex, really doesn't want to hear. And it's unfortunate that most of the media isn't as critical and as questioning as they ought to be. And instead, so we're kind of relying on alternative media, and so we hope that we can help get the message out. And at the end of the day, it will take direct action, and as someone said, not just pleading for elected officials to do the right thing, but sort of holding their feet to the fire. Not literally, DeBlasio, but I mean, metaphorically. So let's continue to do that and speak up and use our voices for the greater good. Thank you so much, Dana, for not giving up.